I sing today? How about Seal? You like Seal?
Seal's definitely like late 80s, early.
I can fly.
No, that's not Seal.
Seal sang that song.
No.
Okay, then I know. I'm so young. I know the Seal version. Okay.
Seal's Kiss from a Rose.
No, he sang "I Believe I Can Fly," guaranteed. Yeah, the guy did.
It wasn't his song.
It was on Space Jam.
It was not his song, I guarantee it. Google
R. Kelly?
Google
Okay.
who sings that.
Let's sing some
Yeah,
R. Kelly.
yeah.
I believe I can fly.
That's pissing on kids.
I just
okay?
peed
That's
in
not
your
Seal.
damn eye. All right.
There's a little difference.
That's
big
fair.
difference.
But I just know the Seal version. We are live on.
For Seal to take over an R. Kelly song would be amazing and actually.
He did. I'm telling you, Space Jam was Seal. I'm telling you. Are we
What
good
pro-
on Instagram?
We'll see what people are.
All right, we'll see what people
they say. 'Cause
Tune in real quick
They
and
just
let me
heard
know
all of
that.
that.
I know that Seal sang "I Believe I Can Fly" in Space Jam, but that is irrelevant for what we're talking about today. And I know what you're thinking right now.
No.
Where can you get this sick?
What I'm actually thinking is, who did that song originally?
Who
Not Seal.
Okay, who originally did that song? Please Google it for us, Chris, while I do this introduction.
We're pretty sure it's R. Kelly.
Because R. Kelly might have originally done it, but I know the Seal version. That's all I'm saying. But irrelevant, guys.
What is
We have
R.
this
Kelly
co-
up to these days?
Peeing on kids like usual. But what we are going to talk about is, we just talked about 3 minutes ago, not R. Kelly peeing on someone, but where I could get a brand new shirt. And guys, if you're looking at this sick-ass hat and this sick-ass shirt, you can go to www.shocktherapyusa.com and buy that stuff. But we're not going to talk about that today. What we're going to talk about today is how to make adjustments on your car, different terrains, why you should adjust, high speed, low speed, rebound. But in order to do that, we got to go over to Justin Smith.
Thank you very much, Steve. But way more important than what you were talking about and running out of breath with this subject of the show, who did that song? Was it R. Kelly?
Definitely R. Kelly.
Okay. The verdict is in, Steve.
Did Seal do a cover of that song, Chris? That's all I need to know.
Yep. No, R. Kelly. But we digress. Usually that's how we do it around here anyway.
Fly Like an Eagle.
Fly Like an Eagle.
Seal did that, right?
Kiss from a Rose.
Okay, so Fly Like an Eagle
Seal
is what I'm thinking
songs.
of.
You guys
That's what I'm thinking
pipe
of. Fly
in.
Like I'm thinking of Fly Like an Eagle. I was wrong.
How about Crazy? Another one.
I'm not that old, Justin, but I agree with you.
Hey, Seal was good baby making music back in high school.
I'm gonna kiss
Before you were born.
That's probably why I was born.
Could have been the reason.
Yep.
But, adjusters, man. How they work. We're going to show you the inside of some of this stuff, what you should adjust for different terrains. Most everybody wants to know, hey, my car bucks, what do I do? Pretty straightforward, right? It's not, because it could be so many different things. But we'll get into that. And if you guys have any questions, then please sign on, list it. Mitch and Steve will grab those questions and we'll answer them for you. But before we get those questions from you, let's go to the board of magical treats. And as far as
Magical treats, huh,
yeah,
Justin?
well, these are all treats. As far as shock guys are concerned, this is pretty much like Mecca, right, when it comes to adjusters and things like that. So shock adjustments. We got the handy-dandy little back tire on a UTV trailing arm and a shock. I mean, this is pretty good graphics. We went all out and spent all the money today. But we've got a few things when it comes to adjusters or adjustments. You got low-speed compression, high-speed compression, rebound adjustment. These are typically the things you have on the outside of a shock that you can adjust, help your ride quality. We'll talk about what they do. Typically, you're not going to get this from an adjustment, but free bleed, when you get into a race shocks, especially like on a Fox external bypass, you get a yellow or gold valve. Gold valve is a free bleed adjustment. It gives you, we'll go into that. Bump stage. Bump stage is something everybody wants a lot of so that you don't bottom out. It usually isn't an adjustment you can do. The new Bilsteins do have an adjustment for that. Top out extension or rebound, extension rebound speed. This is what you hear when the shock goes fully extended and clunks. That's top out. We're going to go through that. And pressure balance, which most people don't know what that is. Steve, you're dying to say something.
Justin,
I just want
to point out that it's not Bill Steen, it's Bill Stein.
Bill Stein.
Bill Stein.
Yeah, no, you got to shove the
Just gotta make sure
Stein
you get
in there.
Yes.
I apologize.
You're good.
Got a little German in me. I can get a little bit of slack on that one for not being able to pronounce it right. All right. Low speed compression. You guys, these are technical, and I'm just going to really dumb this down and be very simple with it. So I don't want to hear anybody yelling at me about not having the right technical terms, like dampening or damper. Okay, whatever, get over it. Low speed compression. Okay, low speed compression on most adjusters. This is a DSC or dual speed compression adjuster you're going to find on most Fox shocks. Dual speed compression adjuster, you've got a low speed on the upper or screwdriver adjustment, and you've got a high speed adjustment on the larger nut. This is 17 millimeter nut, by the way, but this one right here is low speed. Low speed does not refer to how fast you're driving your car. It has nothing to do with speed. It has everything to do with shaft speed. Shaft speed being how quickly or slowly this shock shaft is compressed into the shock. That is the speed that is being referred to right here. So if this shaft is moving slowly, say like 50 to 80, 100 inches or less a second, that is kind of like rolling through stuff, not whoops that are sharp, but kind of up and down rolling graded roads. Not a speed bump. Speed bump is actually a pretty quick movement. But it also has to do with little chop and chatter while you're going through that kind of rolling terrain. So low speed, as you turn that in, is going to stiffen up that circuit. That takes a car that is kind of just boaty and kind of all out of control a little bit, doesn't have a firm feel to it. As you stiffen up that low speed compression adjuster, it'll take that boatiness and settle it. All of a sudden, it doesn't have that movement. It'll stay still, but only in large, slow shaft movement type of situations. Anything on that? Mitch? Nope. You're good. Steve? You're good? All right. Next, high-speed compression. High-speed compression on a DSC would be the larger of the adjusters that are on here. High speed, again, does not refer to the speed at which you're driving. It does not mean that because you're going 60 miles an hour, it's going to adjust that. It is the speed of the shaft compressing into the shock. That, if this speed is quick, say 150 to 250 inches a second, that means you hit something big. Bam, right? That tire drove right into that 1.5 foot tall whoop at 40 miles an hour, and that tire went boom. That shock shaft went instantly quicker inside the shock. That is a high speed adjustment. When you make that compression adjustment, as you turn it in, it's going to stiffen it. It's going to limit fluid flow, which slows the tire movement down on high speed movements. So high speed is going to control the feel through big whoops. It's going to control the feel through like a G-out, maybe a boom, one of these. It's going to control the feel through a washout, come down a ridge and it's washed out and it's got a 1 or 8 foot ledge on it, that kind of stuff. But bam, that's an instant. I got a lot of sound effects on this one, right? That's an instant shaft movement. Okay, that adjustment is going to give you softer or firmer in those situations. So low speed, shaft speed, high speed, shaft speed. That's how those change those. Different compression adjusters. Come on over here. We got a few. So let's go kind of through super badass compression adjuster. This is a live valve adjuster, which is what you would find on all the Fox shocks on a Dynamics suspension system for Polaris. This adjuster does exactly the same thing that this one does, except instead of being a manual adjuster, this is an electronic adjuster that's an internal magnet and electronically controlled. The reason these are so badass is because a computer is controlling this to give you better ride quality according to the sensors in the vehicle. If you guys don't know what that is, look up Dynamics with Polaris and you can see some of the stuff that that'll do. This one is, isn't there another name for this other than 3 position?
QS3.
QS3. Right. So QS3 adjuster. This adjuster does the same thing that this compression adjuster does, but it only has one adjustment. It has 3 positions that you can put it in, and it is only high speed. So it'd just be the same as taking this larger nut and only adjusting this one without a low speed adjuster. It is a little bit simpler. It doesn't control as much flow. Some of these can have more or less oil flow through them. I will go through what that affects inside the shock. But as far as your adjustments go, it's as simple as stiffening the system or loosening it with 3 positions on that one. This one is also a DSC, dual compression adjuster, low speed and high speed, but it's for a smaller shock. This is a 2-inch diameter shock adjuster versus a 2.5. I mean, the size is massively different. Why does the adjuster have to be different when the shock diameters change? It is because the amount of oil that's pushed through this adjuster is gigantically different between a 2.5-inch diameter shock and a 2. Where do these go? All right, on the shock. Compression adjuster sits up here in the bridge. So shock, shaft, body, internally you got a piston and valving, you got a body cap. Body cap's got a bridge to the reservoir. This adjuster sits in this passage, in the middle of the passage between the shock body and the reservoir, controlling the fluid that flows through those. On a small shock, there's not very much fluid. On a big shock, there's a whole lot more fluid having to pass through there. A lot more has to be controlled. This brings up, let me go through the rest of these and then I'll go back to that. But it brings up a thing that everybody asks about, which is mostly like within shock guy circles, you know, how much fluid has to flow through that. If you want more to flow through that, you want less to flow through that. We'll go over that in 1 second. This is compression adjuster from an IQS. IQS is an electronic computer-controlled adjustment that we offer, and you can add this to any of the Fox 2.5s and some other stuff too, and 2.0s. But this base valve adjuster is controlled electronically with a little servo motor that's on the inside of this. So you can press a button on the dash and do your compression adjustments from inside. This one right here is called what, Steve?
That is called a high-speed compression adjuster off of an XP Turbo, which is Fox.
So this is a factory or OEM
That
style
is an
adjuster.
OEM style, which you could always swap out for with a DSC.
Correct. So this is kind of a good example of how things can change. So this adjuster fits on a 2.5-inch shock, but it is completely different than this one. You know what it is? It's a whole lot cheaper to put in an OEM factory vehicle, which saves everybody a ton of money. But this one is a badass upgrade. You might want to put that in. It's an option for some of the stuff that we do so that you get a little bit more flow and more control and more adjustment. Steve.
Justin, just to let some of the people know, those do fit on a 3.0 shock as well. They're asking, are those only 2.5 related? They do fit on a 3.0 shock or a 3.05 shock as well.
Good point, Steve. And one of the reasons that that is an option now is because Fox, over the last couple of years, standardized the diameters of this dimension so that these can swap out from shock to shock now, as opposed to in the past, you might have had a different adjuster on certain OEs, you have a different adjuster on a race shock, different adjuster on a 2.0 or 2.5 or a 3.0. Now the standardization is kind of happening within production, so these things can be swapped around. Mitch, what do you got?
Israel commented, kind of a little off topic, but not really, I guess. He said, I had my X3 shocks done by you with IQS, and it still rides rough. I feel every little rock. My son's KRX ES rides a lot better than mine. Does it so much smoother?
So the IQS, or electronic control, does not make it softer, smoother, harder, or anything. It gives you the electronic control to turn it up and down. So what you're experiencing is probably inside the shock from a valving standpoint or a spring thing. It could also be a ton of external factors like which tire you're running, what sidewall, how thick the sidewall is, whether the tire is round, square, changes everything. Wheel spacers, wheel offset, a lot of things affect that. But if it's something that we've done, then let us know and we'll get back in there and make it exactly the way you want it. IQS does not control that.
Bam.
There you go. Boom.
Beautiful.
Right?
Bam.
Yes. Bam. All right. Back to the adjuster. Last adjuster on the table. This is a Walker compression adjuster. So, Steve.
Yeah.
Don't laugh. You're making the Walker adjuster feel inadequate.
That's what I'm here for, Justin.
Okay. Walker adjuster, number one, only has high speed adjustment. It does not have a low speed adjustment, so it's not dual compression. Number 2, does not have nearly the cool engineering involved when it comes to over pressurizing a system and having a spring pop off so you don't blow shocks up by over compressing everything. It does not have, a pop off rebound, so that means it does not restrict rebound flow like this one. It also, you see how it's pressed together, is not very rebuildable, and it certainly isn't very tunable. These, in a short and very descriptive term, I'll try to be very nice about it, suck. And this is one of the reasons why walkers typically are not as adjustable as anything else, and are very limited as far as how much you can do with the adjustability inside of a walker. But very easy to see when you take a look at that without even taking it apart. Adjuster, compression, and how that is controlling how the shock functions. Shock blown apart. Let's just say that all the oil inside this shock is in red. Red oil, red flow. We've got oil that can pass through the piston, through the valving. If that piston, let's say you hit a big bump, boom, piston's coming up. It's trying to push oil through the piston and through the valving. But another thing that it's doing is this shaft is starting to come inside the shock body. More and more shaft is coming into the shock body and trying to push the oil that's inside this outside of the body. This shaft volume is what is coming through the bridge and into the reservoir. The exact amount of oil that enters the reservoir is the same as the area of this shaft. So let's just say that's like 3 square inches of shaft volume, then 3 square inches of oil volume are going inside that reservoir. That oil passes through this adjuster, and as you turn this up or down, you're limiting the amount of oil that can pass through here or allowing more to go through. That stiffens up the system on compression or opens it up and allows the oil to flow. One easy way to look at that is if you look at this adjuster, there's a hole down the center of it, and that hole is part of what this adjuster is controlling. Do this. How's that?
That was so hot.
You like that, Steve?
That was so hot.
All right, that was for your pleasure, sir.
Thank you.
But my point is oil is restricted as you stiffen the system. The amount of oil that's restricted is equal to the shaft displacement. Steve.
Justin, there are a couple people on here that want to know, are there aftermarket high, low-speed adjusters for the Walker Evans?
There is not. The only thing that's going to fit a Walker is Walker component, and Walker doesn't have the velocity high and low. I don't know if it's the earlier stuff.
I don't think it does.
It does not. So if you have a velocity, you have high and low speed adjustment. If you have anything other than a velocity, then the answer is no. But, I don't know, there's a rumor going around that there might be some adjusters available for walkers and a whole bunch of other parts available for walkers very soon. Not from Walker. Weird.
Huh.
Yeah. Who would have thought?
Weird.
Yeah. And Walker, you're welcome. Yes, Steve, what do you
Justin, just a couple people on here. Patrick Winkler, our old buddy.
What's
he
up, Patrick?
said, "What's up, fellas?" What's up, Pat?
How's it going, Patrick? Badass to see you on here. So back to adjusters, right? Compression. I think we've kind of covered that. We got high speed, we got low speed. Remember, speed is not mile an hour, it is shaft speed. So the size of the bump and how quickly it is hit is what we're kind of talking about there. We've got rebound. Rebound adjustment controls how fast or how slowly this tire comes down or how fast or slowly the shock extends out. So once you've hit something, once you've compressed the system, boom, hit a bump, how quickly that extends or how slowly it extends. You've got a couple zones too. You can control how quick or slow it extends when it's compressed. You can control how quickly or slowly it extends in the middle. You can also slow it down at the very, very end so it doesn't clunk. That is also called a top out or extension adjuster or extension or rebound adjuster on the top out stroke. If you look inside the shock, this is a top out spring. So imagine this piston internally and the shaft coming out. That piston ends up coming in contact with that spring. The spring goes, slows it down on extension so it doesn't come out and go bang. Springs are kind of not the best way to control that because springs have a certain rate and they have to be tuned to the weight of the wheel and tire. They have to be tuned to the weight of the control arms that are on the car. So that extension speed is what the spring is going to slow down. Well, if you put a big wheel and tire on it that weighs twice as much, that's more weight that's pulling on the system comes out too quickly and goes bam, and you hear a big clunk. That is the internal portion of this shock coming together and making that noise. Eventually causes damage, and that's why limit straps are badass, because a limit strap will stop it right before it compresses a spring and hurts parts. You can also adjust a limit strap, and if you have heavier wheels and tires or change the arms or do all kinds of stuff, you don't have to get inside the shock to adjust it. You just adjust the limit strap to stop that clunk. Steve first, Mitch second.
Justin, could you add a heavier extension spring and not run a limit strap?
Yes, absolutely you can add that. First, you must find it. They are available, but they're kind of hard to find. Fox does have a few. There are none when it comes to Walker. You're not going to find different rates. You're probably not going to find it with anybody else. So you have to do your research. You have to find the part numbers. Trust me, the part number books are this big. It's not that easy to find. But you also have to get inside the shock to do that. If you're willing to do it, great. A lot of times, though, there's not enough spring rate available. Like extension springs range from like 150 pounds per inch, 200 pounds an inch, 300 pounds an inch, and the stiffest ones you're going to find are like 400 pounds an inch. That kind of stuff is not enough for a heavy 33-inch tire and boxed arms on a really nice car. That stuff is going to have way more weight, more speed, plus you got to throw axles and all kinds of other things on there for unsprung weight. Those spring rates probably aren't enough. Strap is the only way to really do that. But yeah, if it's like short course and trying to keep it light, you could probably tune it a little bit because the wheel and tire is lighter. Mitch, you had
Perfect. Yeah. Molly DeFrenchie. Pretty good question. DeFrenchie, yeah.
Like that's his last name, or he is DeFrenchie?
It looks like a dog page.
He's the French.
Oh, okay.
Maybe,
like Frenchie dogs.
Pretty good question, though. It said, to adjust the rebound, is it better to drive and go by feel or have somebody else drive and you observe what the shock is doing?
Wow, that is a great question. So let me answer that question by telling you more about the rebound adjuster, which I got sidetracked on extension stuff. Okay, first, hang in there, DeFrenchie. I'm going to get there. Rebound. Extension speed is what you're controlling. How is that adjusted? Typically, it's going to be an adjuster on the bottom of the shaft on the lower loop. This adjuster, you turn in to slow the extension down, and you unthread this or counterclockwise typically to speed that extension up. The way that works is inside this, the shaft is hollow. See the hole in there? There is a rebound adjuster right in there. There's also a couple of needle valves with check balls. These also are inside the shaft. They are controlling how much oil goes through the shaft and comes out below the piston. This sits right here. There's a piston in the middle. Oil goes through the shaft, is controlled by where that meter is adjusted, which comes from your adjustment on the bottom, and controls the oil flow around the piston coming out of the shaft. So technically, shaft-style adjusters for rebound are actually a free bleed adjuster. They're limiting free bleeding passing the piston. But as they do that, as you restrict the oil through the piston, restricting the oil through the shaft forces oil to go through the piston. That is where the rebound valving starts to take control, and you will feel that adjustment. Sometimes when you adjust this looser, the rebound gets quicker, but then it gets really plush. It's because the free bleed makes it feel plush. Rebound is not necessarily the majority of control, depending on where the valving is and shaft speeds and a whole bunch of other stuff.
It's actually a good point because it does almost control both compression.
It kind of does. So a lot of times when we tune stuff And all you other shock tuners, you're welcome with what I'm about to say. Sometimes it is better to have more rebound stack on the piston and have your adjuster all the way loose so that you can get the free bleed plush feel and still have the adjustment in the rebound. That is one direction you can go. That is not always the best direction, though. Steve.
Justin, does anyone make a aftermarket accessory for Rebound? Like a nut or anything like that?
Man, Steve, that is such a good question. I don't want to get around
DeFrenchie.
DeFrenchie, yeah, sorry, DeFrenchie.
Yeah, I'm going to get back to DeFrenchie. But Steve, you are correct, sir. I wonder who makes this aftermarket accessory for a nut. So this is a stainless steel nut with valving in it that we actually make. It is a one-way check valve for Rebound. So that thread's on top. It becomes the nut that holds this whole package together. The one thing you will see, if you look inside here, it has, boom, boom, it's got valving in there that is spring-loaded. And so by doing this system, we're able to control Rebound in one direction, just the rebound direction, and it no longer is both free bleed and rebound, which makes the adjustment really, really awesome and only controls rebound instead of two things at once. So that's an option. DeFrenchie's question was,
to adjust the rebound, is it better to drive and go by feel or have somebody else drive and you observe what the shock is doing?
so the answer is both, in my opinion, because driving seat of the pants, you're going to get the big swings. You're going to feel whether it's just boaty all the time, and that may not be a free bleed issue. It might just be rebound. You put some rebound in it, and the boat goes away. Or it might be, low speed compression could control that too, but you're going to be able to feel that. If you go through whoops like this, the tire's following the bottom, and it comes off this one, and it kind of jumps off. The tire stays up in the air before it hits the next one. You're going to feel that two ways. One, the engine's going to run up in RPM. That's wing, ying, ying, ying as you go through whoops, right? Good sound effects, right, Steve? Thanks.
I love it, Justin.
Yeah. So you're going to hear the engine's going to come up and hit the limiter in between the whoops. That means the rebound is too slow. You might want to speed it up. Let the tire follow the whoops, and then you might find the RPM not doing that anymore. Now it's just brr, solid RPM through the whoops, which means the tire's on the ground. But the true way to do this is you get it close with your butt cheek, and then you get out in video and you watch the details and see if you might be coming off the ground a little bit on the rebound side of the whoop, or you're picking up a little bit of a buck on the top of the whoop that might be rebound to slow that down. You may not be able to feel it a little bit. So I think you have to do both. Big changes with your butt, small changes with video.
Perfect.
How would you do it, Mitch?
I like slow-mo video is awesome because you can really see and pick it apart. But yeah, I mean, driving it, there's telltale signs to know what it's kind of doing. It can confuse you at times because it might be a compression buck or a rebound buck
or
too.
Rebound, man. All of a sudden you're like, which one is it?
But the video kind of clears that up for you too. So I agree with you. I think both are awesome. You get it super close by driving it in the field, and then you really fine tune it from slow-mo video and really picking it apart, if you will, and kind of dial it in from there. So.
Cool. All right, good enough on rebound. Next, free bleed. All right, free bleed is not going to be something you're going to see in UTVs. You're going to see that typically in big race stuff where external bypasses with tubes welded on the outside have a free bleed adjuster. It is the same as drilling a hole in the piston and letting oil fly through. It's going to feel plusher and smoother and nicer in the chop and in the chatter. The negative is, though, it gets really boaty and you can't control it. So drilling a hole isn't always the best. Sometimes you've got shims or in valve stack, different shims. We can do a free bleed shim that'll control it just a little bit at a time instead of some drastic change like a hole in the piston. We've got pop-off shim. So like on this compression adjuster, this is the rebound side. Notice this has got a spring on it. I can pop that right off the piston real easy. So this is a way to free bleed flow one direction, but if it comes back the other way, it's shut and you block it off. So you get a plush ride this way. It gets non-boaty this way. These types of things we can do on the piston and try and help that. But free bleed is something that we always want a little bit of in off-road, so you don't feel that stuff, but you just don't want too much. Free bleed is not something you can adjust on the outside of a typical UTV. Bump stage. Bump stage is just the last bit of compression. Boom. You want to take your UTV and drive it around, not feel any of the bumps, whoops, and everything are awesome, but all of a sudden, boom, little jump you weren't expecting, land into a wash, comes in. You don't want to bottom it out and drag the skid plate and hurt your back. You want that last little bit to go and ramp up, right? That's the bump stage in the shock. That's controlled not externally, unless Bilstein has an external bump stage adjustment, but most shocks don't. And that's controlled internally, sometimes by a secondary bump stage cup, compression cup, sometimes by internal bypass. As the piston passes all the bypass ports, it gets into a bump stage after that. With a Walker Evans, it's a needle valve. As that shaft gets fully compressed, a needle goes through the shaft and ramps the compression stage up, limits oil flow. What are some of the other ones? King's got a secondary, a free bleed piston, or a bypass piston, I think is what they call it. And that bypass piston allows for different tunability when it comes into the bump stage. That's kind of it between bypasses, compression cups, like an RC2.
I didn't know if you mentioned that.
And needles. That's kind of all the ways everybody does it. But typically it's not external. Top out or extension rebound, we talked about that. That's usually controlled by an extension spring. And last on this list of things to be concerned about is pressure balance. Pressure balance is something that the average guy driving your car, adjusting your car, is never going to know or care or needs to know. Okay, this is engineering within the shock on how things are tuned, and it's mostly shock guide dyno stuff. But pressure balance, you kind of hear some shock guys talk about swapping out different pistons on these adjusters, which give you different flow rates. These flow rates might change how the shock functions, and in theory, it rides better, right? Well, it can happen, and it's possible, but typically when you start changing the base valve, these compression adjusters are called base valves as well. When you change these base valves, you're changing how much oil goes through this section. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. If you restrict it and then all of a sudden hit a bump, what can happen is it'll build pressure between the adjuster and the piston. This pressure can spike on a big hit and expand or blow up the shock. Not good, right? That is a perfect example of not being in pressure balance because you're overpressurizing a portion through certain scenarios, right? So to take a overpressurized compression zone and fix it, you would go to a different base valve piston so that you have the right amount of flow through here so you don't overpressurize that compression zone. The opposite, if you go and you open the flow up in this base valve too high, then you move too much oil, which allows the shock to move the piston quite fast. Then what can happen is you lose pressure in the rebound or the back side of the piston. This can go from 200 psi of nitrogen pressure on the bottom of the piston. If it moves too quick and there's too much flow up here, you can get this to negative psi and create a vacuum. That tears the shock oil apart. That destroys shock oil molecules, and that makes shock oil very dark and smell like crap in like 100 miles instead of thousands of race miles. When you cavitate the oil or cavitating the rebound side, then you have instant shock oil failure. Also, you can hear it. If it's really bad and you have your helmet off the vehicle and land a car and come back up on the rebound stroke, you can hear it go, and a lot of people don't know what that noise is like, but you can actually hear it tearing the oil apart because it's separating molecules. So a lot of shock guys don't know about pressure balance and don't know how to fix it because they don't have a dyno and they can't measure it. They just realize, they're just like, well, I need more oil or I need better oil, and they're searching for better oil all the time instead of actually fixing the problem. So that's something that you got to consider. I went over all the adjustments. Next is going to be terrain.
Yeah.
Mitch,
I'm going to throw a little plug in there. Scout Racing asked if we have any ETA on shocks, really one I set before Vegas to Reno.
On what shocks?
Our Seal Savers, the shock covers.
Actually, so this is kind of a prototype that we've got. What is this, you may ask? This wraps around the shock, around the spring, keeps rocks off the shaft, keeps dirt and sand and mud and all kinds of stuff from getting up into the seal on the bottom of the seal cap and blowing the shock out. So, hence, these are called seal savers. Mitch, answer to his question on seal savers.
There is a little birdie that told me that we are going to have them next week. So they will be on the site ready to go. I'm assuming next week is before Vegas to Reno. So
That would help them out.
yes.
One of the reasons why these were not available earlier is because we were running them on all the race cars and making sure that we didn't have shock temperature issues by having that wrapped up. And we didn't see any noticeable temperature issues over the last 6-8 months of racing this stuff. So we've got basically the material's correct. It's got some breathability. It doesn't let stuff in it, but it does let temperature in and out. Perfect. Now it works good. So we're going to come out with that here pretty quick. Awesome. Steve,
Yeah.
would you like to come over here and show anybody how the compression valve works again?
Yeah, I would love to.
Well, here you go. This one right here. It's got your name all over it.
Excuse me. So,
Okay, stop before you blow a gasket.
already blew one, Justin.
Excellent. All right, moving on.
Did we just kiss?
We did. We touched lips via
just
compression
touched lips.
adjuster. I'm good with it.
Yep.
So, terrain. You guys, this is kind of what everybody asks, right? Maybe not everybody wants to know how this stuff works. They just want to know, what do I turn to fix it? Or what do I turn to change on the adjuster? What do I turn on the adjusters to make it better for different terrain? Well, it's very, very hard to just say, here's what you do for everything, because everybody's vehicle is different, you drive different, and terrain's different. I mean, a jump could be round, you jump it perfectly, and it lands just fine, and then all of a sudden you take the next jump, it's got a little lip on it, and it bugs. Is that the vehicle's fault? Is that something you can adjust? I don't know. But, jump choice, terrain changes are really important. Typically, if you've got a lot of boatiness, it just kind of feels like an old Cadillac with worn out shocks, that's a low speed compression adjustment. That's going to settle things down. You're always going to be turning more into it, or clockwise is going to slow things down, stiffen things up. Sometimes that boatiness can be in the rebound side. The rebound might be open too far. It's allowing the extension to be too quick. You can put a little bit of rebound into it, and that boatiness might go away. So it could be one or the other. We, with all this stuff advice, we're going to suggest that you try it. If it didn't fix it, put it back. Try this one. Didn't fix it, put it back. Do one thing at a time. You'll end up sneaking up on the right way to do it. Compression. Now, let's say you're going through the whoops and it's badass, but then all of a sudden a big hit, boom, and it bottoms out. That's going to be a high-speed adjustment. Start turning compression, high-speed compression into it. It'll stiffen the system up, specifically in big hits. It shouldn't affect all the little stuff very much, but that is usually, if you're bottoming out on a jump landing, you're bottoming out on a G-out. If the whoops are 2 or 3 feet tall and you're bottoming out on those, usually it's going to be high speed. Mitch and Steve, you guys have something good, because both of you are rolling your eyes.
We're
I
talking
wanna
about
know.
someone that doesn't bottom out, and his name is Premature John.
Oh, he does not bottom out. Good for John.
He said, go ahead, Mitchie, just you read it.
Or maybe you need a rebuild. That's
You know
all.
what?
That's all we got.
He's actually right.
I disagree.
I strongly disagree.
If you're bottoming out, you need a rebuild? Is that the point?
No, just not. You don't.
We'll get to rebuilds here in a second, you guys, because if the shocks are blowing out internally or leaking, none of this adjustment's going to matter. The thing isn't working right, you can't adjust it. We'll get to that in just 1 second. So, low speed compression, boatiness, a little bit of rebound, boatiness, big hits, bottoming out, or the biggest hit in history and you don't bottom out. Maybe you want to loosen the thing up so it rides better. Maybe it doesn't need to be that stiff and you're not using all of the suspension abilities through all the little stuff because you have it too stiff. Rebound. Rebound is tough. And just like
DeFrenchie
asked, it's hard to describe what a rebound adjuster is going to affect for you, but usually if you're going through some whoops or a little bit of a kicker and the car bucks, it's ass high, you kind of want to put a little bit more rebound into it and see if that bucking goes away and it starts to settle it down. That's one way. If it does not fix it, it could be that you're coming along, the tire is working, it works, it's bottomed out, and it bucks off a compression buck. Maybe it needs to be a little bit stiffer in the mid-stroke so that it doesn't bottom out and buck. So compression bucks can be part of that. Rebound usually is more of a control over the bucking. One good way to adjust rebound is to find a really easy jump. Like, doesn't have to be 10 feet off the ground, it could be a foot, could be 6 inches off the ground. But something that's controllable, some nice little deal where you can jump the car like a foot off the ground, and when it lands, you want to adjust how it recovers. The car compresses and comes back one time and keeps going. Rebound's probably spot on. Compresses and goes boing, comes back up a second time. Okay, rebound's too fast, start slowing it down by turning that in. What if the front rebounds a little bit too fast? It lands and it goes doing like this. Slow just the front rebound down. Land it, the back comes up a couple extra times. Slow just the back down. You have too much rebound when you jump it and land it and the tire comes off the ground with the car. That's too much, speed it up. Hopefully that's kind of an easy way to adjust that. That's actually probably the most solid way to do it without having to have a bunch of people around with a lot of slow motion cameras and stuff like that. You guys want to add anything to the rebound side of things?
I think you nailed it on the head on that. I mean, that's how I explain it to customers. So
Okay. So how about terrain? Oversimplifying, trails, mountain, rock crawling, that kind of stuff is going to be very soft settings. Soft on the compression side. You can soften it up on both high and low speed. Certainly the high speed because you're not having big giant hits and bottom outs and stuff if you're not driving very fast. You can just about take the high speed compression and go all the way soft. If you want the ride to be a little nicer, you can take the low speed on the compression and go all the way soft until it gets boaty when you're driving around between rock to rock or trail to trail, and then add just a little bit more to stop that boatiness. Rebound on trail stuff is going to be a lot of rebound. Because you're driving so slowly, you don't want to go over a rock and have the tire fly out on the other side. You also, usually when you're going from rock trail to trail, you're on a graded road between here and there. Graded roads, you want a lot of rebound to keep it settled. If you get into where there's a lot of whoops, then the rebound has to be quicker so the tire follows the terrain. Desert. From trail all the way soft, desert is going to kind of be in the middle. You're going to need some more compression because the whoops are bigger, the G-outs are more prevalent, the speeds are higher. Rebound is going to get a little bit faster because you want the tire to follow these sharp desert terrain whoops and ruts and things like that. Rebound is going to be a little faster than trail. Next, from desert, you're going to go to dunes. Dunes is going to require the most compression adjustment of all these because there isn't anything around the dunes that's nice, not as super sharp, like a nasty rock whoop to hit and hurt. I mean, normally if you have the compression turned stiff and you hit a really sharp lip in the desert, bam, ouch, it hurts. In the dunes, everything's round, sand is fairly soft, you can get away with more compression and things don't bother you. Also, big G-outs, down a dune, bam, in the bottom and out the other side. That is a lot of force. It typically is enough force to squish a sidewall of a tire and drag a skid plate if you don't have the air pressures up high enough. You're going to turn the compression up a lot compared to the desert to go to the dunes. And rebound, you're going to go back the other way. So you had a lot of rebound in the trails. You didn't have very much rebound in the desert. Back in the dunes, you're going to start putting more rebound into it. The reason is that most of the stuff in the dunes are kind of rolly, slow elevation changes, and that kind of makes a car feel really boaty. And the whoops are not nasty shaped, they're round, so the tire speed can be a little slower and the tire stays on the ground. It'll feel less boaty if you do that. So hopefully those three things helps you and gets you a starting point. I think if you go desert and you go dunes, you'll find out here's your settings in the desert, here's your settings in the dunes. You change them when you pull them off the trailer. Show up in the dunes, here's my dune setup. Here and go back to the desert, here's my desert setup. Mitch, what do you want to add?
You nailed it, because that is probably number one question that we get asked when we're at the dunes is, what
do I start at?
What do I start at, or what do I put my car at? Or they don't even know. They just brought it, straight from the desert and took it out to the dunes, and they went and drove it, and it's too soft. So we always ask, did you put adjustment into it? Have you played with your adjusters? Have you done anything to the shock to kind of compensate for the two differences there? So
sometimes you're a couple clicks away from being perfect, and it's just that somebody didn't change it from where they liked it in the desert or where they liked it in the mountains.
Yeah, I think it's super important to kind of educate people on, what to do from one terrain to the other.
And tire pressure.
And tire pressure. That is another
people
one.
Show up with paddle tires and 6 pounds of air in the tire. It's going to squish the sidewall. It's going to bend a wheel and bottom the car out. The shock isn't even controlling it. Your compression stroke at that point with that low of air pressure. You need to be up in the 12 and up range with a paddle tire. Traction is not an issue with these cars. You don't need flotation. You do need pressure so that the suspension works properly and the shock actually functions right. Steve, what do you want to add, sir?
What about 2-wheel drive and 4-wheel drive, Justin?
Whoa. Good question. Mind blown right there. So, 2-wheel drive versus 4-wheel drive are completely different shock settings. The reason is, in 2-wheel drive, the back tire is, let's say, in the desert, you don't have any traction at all. And it's just spinning a tire. Well, if it's just spinning when it's trying to go over a whoop, then there's nothing shoving the car forward off the whoop. It's just spinning and the front drops, and it might have more bucking with that. 4-wheel drive in the desert is much faster in a corner. Every off-road racer runs 4-wheel drive because it's way faster than 2. And when you come through a whoop, the front tires pull the car over the top of the whoop as the back tires come into it, and the car tends to be a lot more level and flat and more controllable through whoops and rough terrain in 4-wheel drive when you're pinned, and certainly quicker acceleration out of a corner and less bucking. Dunes. If you show up in the dunes with a dirt tire in 2-wheel drive, it's going to suck. Number 1, no traction. Number 2, no acceleration. Number 3, it's not going to go through the whoops at all from a dead stop to 40 miles an hour. You'd have to be 50 and plus to go through the whoops in a desert tire in 2-wheel drive. You put a paddle on it, you got a lot of traction. So 2-wheel drive isn't too bad with a paddle, because now it actually is going to shove the car off the face of the whoop. The tune of the shock, it works much better, it's a lot easier to control, and it's certainly much more fun to drive that way. Still think that 2-wheel drive is faster, that 4-wheel drive is faster in the dunes, even if you have a buff or no paddle on the front of the thing, it's way faster. A lot of people like to drive 2-wheel drive to slide the car in the dunes, though. Drive according to your own preference. Don't do what I say. But when it comes to speed, 4-wheel drive is the only way to do it. And when it comes to ride quality through the rough, 4-wheel drive is better. How's that, Steve?
That was an excellent explanation, Justin. But I do have a question from a Terry Nash.
Oh, Terry.
He said, I've heard the term boaty
Yep.
before in your podcast and never understood the word or exactly what you were talking about. Always thought you were saying boaty or something. Can you elaborate? Thanks. So he was watching Point Break, and Bodie is the surfer in that movie.
Versus
but we're talking
what
boaty.
Yes. So not super stoner Bodie.
Point Break.
Yeah, but boaty as in boat and water. So if you're in a boat, jamming along the lake, it's just constantly moving, man, and you're good with it. There's nothing you're going to change about how that is just constantly boating around, right? That's kind of what we're describing if you're in a vehicle and it's constantly moving around slowly. You can't really control it with the wheel and tire and throttle. It's just constantly moving all the time. That boaty feeling is what I'm talking about, trying to describe. You can slow that down with low speed compression adjustment. You can slow that down by having less free bleed if that's an option for you. You can slow that down a little bit with just a hair rebound too. So those are all ways to fix that. Boatiness is not that bad when it comes to off-road racing. Look at a trophy truck. Any video you look at, that truck is constantly just moving. Even though the tires are dancing through the whoops and doing 1,000 mile an hour vertically, that thing is just constantly moving left to right and you can't really control it. It's dirt and tires are off the ground half the time. So that feeling is more prevalent in a big 6,000-pound truck than it would be on a lighter weight UTV. But boatiness is what I mean. Steve.
Awesome, Justin. The one thing I've learned today and in all of our shows is that we need to pronunciate better because we have a lot of mispronunciations.
You know what? I just don't want to be misunderstood. I just don't. Constantly misunderstood. Yeah. If you guys got any questions, now's your chance. If you don't, oh well. Put it in the bottom. Write it down at the bottom of this video, and we'll try and get to you on YouTube. But for now, that's how adjusters work. That's how some of that stuff should be changed. Different terrains, different suggestions. Hopefully you learned something. That was our goal. Steve?
Justin, two things I'd love to point out today, and we are still running a summer special. One of those specials is free rebuilds with all your ride improvement systems. The second special is anything over $1,500 in product is all free labor.
Also, there's another promotion.
Oh, snap,
that
John.
Jake asked me to say, but I do not have my phone to give you the exact dates and stuff. But I believe there's Dune Fest is the next event. Is that not right?
In Oregon, correct?
No, we just came back from Oregon, isn't it? Damn it, Jake, I'm sorry, man. I didn't have all this stuff written down. What we'll do is we'll put this in the text underneath it, okay? And we'll also do a little bit more promotion. The next place that our semi is going to, we'll let you guys know on media, okay? Is it back to Oregon?
I think it is because our semi is still there.
Oh, well, then there's a reason for that.
I'm pretty sure it's still
Yeah,
Oregon.
I think that does
I don't know
sound
if
right.
it's Coos Bay, but I'm pretty sure it's Oregon.
Okay, well, apologize for not having that nailed down for you guys, but we'll bring it up. We'll put it out. Oh, we got it.
Justin, this just in, Winchester Bay, Oregon for Dune Fest. Catch us there. There's no dates, Chris. Thanks.
That's this weekend or the next one. I forget which one.
I think it's next week.
Okay, well, sorry about that, Jake, for the crappy promotion, but we're going to be out there, you guys, to show up, check out the semi, talk to everybody that's there, answer your questions, sell you some cool swag and some other stuff if you want to. So for now, I say we get the heck out of here. Steve, would you care to send us out of here? Maybe blow us through a compression valve on the way?
Justin, I could probably do that, but I'll save you guys the breath. If you guys would like to order anything off our website or anything we've talked about today, www.shocktherapyusa.com. Or if you have any questions, call in 623-217-4959. Thank you.